Hey, howdy and hello, folks. Welcome back into T1A, Tier 1 Ascension. I'm your host, Tank. Today we're going to be diving into where the 2023 rookies are going in startups. All right. Please like, subscribe, click the notification buttons to catch up on what we're working on. We are looking at our first rookie on the board. We're going to talk today about Jackson Smith-Njigba, a little JSN. Right now, he's in sleeper ADP of 40, puts him in round 4 of your startup drafts. And right now, there are a few players that are going right after him that I would prefer to start my dynasty teams with rather than JSN. So there are 3 players that I would prefer to pick up instead of JSN right now to start my fantasy team, and that's going to be Adams, DK Metcalf, and Drake London. So I agree that all these guys kind of hover at your mid wide receiver 1, late wide receiver 1, and I understand the potential that is JSN, but let's go through this a little bit here and talk about like the players and what we're seeing. Adams by far is the number 1 wide receiver on his team. He's the best target, the biggest asset that they have, and he's going to be the focus of their passing game. You cannot say the same thing about JSN, especially while DK is going to be there and while Lockett's going to be there. I don't think there's too much more that we need to say about Devontae Adams after that. I think he does have a little bit of a step down with Jimmy G coming in, if Jimmy G is going to be healthy. Drake London is the second guy on the list there, somebody that I think is going to have a great year. He is going to be the alpha receiver on his team as well. The only other competition he really has right now is Kyle Pitts. And essentially, for any receiving work, the Falcons didn't add any other targets. The only person they really added was Bijan, which is going to be a primary rusher. This offense isn't really predicated on receiving work for their backs. And that's something we'll go over later here because, surprise, Bijan is going to be on our list today as rookies that we'll talk about. So there's the multifaceted case of JSN, where he hurts DK, where he helps DK, and where he doesn't really affect too much of what DK Metcalf's doing in the offense. But where I see it right now, DK is still going to be a top 10 wide receiver. JSN could be a solid wide receiver 2, maybe even for this year. And then Tyler Lockett's going to be a solid wide receiver 3 with a few week 1 upsides because he always has a few of those big blow up games where he has 2-3 receptions, 100 plus yards. For me, I sit as JSN will be good and have good solid workloads year in and year out, but with DK and his phenomenal jumping prowess, his speed, his ability to grow and keep developing as a wide receiver, he is also the highest rated red zone target, and there's not anything saying that JSN is going to take away from that. If we look at last year, DK was 3rd in red zone targets. He had a low year of efficiency. He only caught 9 of those. But if you look, the team is forcing him in the red zone because of his abilities. That should still continue. JSN can get his own work share, but I still see DK holding down that red zone prowess, and that's where a lot of his value keeps him in the top 10 for me. With DK staying as a top red zone target for the Seahawks, it just limits JSN's upside to have those touchdowns, which I think just keeps him out of that wide receiver 1 range. JSN coming in as the 40th pick, I'd still rather have these other guys because they're going to be the alphas on their team. They're still going to carry that main workload that drives the passing offense through them. And for those reasons, I'm going to pick those other guys over JSN at that spot, at that value. Next up on our board here, Bijan Robinson, currently in a sleeper ADP of 11. First running back taken off the board in a lot of startups right now. Whoa. I understand what's happening with his ADP, but the guy hasn't stepped on the field yet. You know, if he comes out and has more of a timeshare than what we truly expect, what you guys going to consider him a bust because he didn't take that full workload? You got to remember he's going to build into that offense. They're going to have Cordero come in and they're going to probably use Algier and keep him with a little bit of workload just because he's going to be a seasoned back now. But, he will have a true lion's share probably by mid-season. I mean, he's done decently in pass protection, and I think he and Cordero can really split stuff. The fact that Bijan doesn't have to come off the field on third downs will be a big benefactor. But if we go ahead and look into what the Atlanta Falcons did last year, they had 2,718 rushing yards. Holy buckets. That's a lot of rushing yards. 559 attempts. I mean, we have Brady throw for that, and we're like, yeah, lock him in. Well, we should be doing the same thing for the Falcons. There's opportunities there. But I don't think that they're going to come in and drop 300 rushing attempts on Bijan his first year. They're going to probably push it to the 250 to 270, rotate in Cordero, Algier, probably a little touch of Caleb Williams, and try to keep somewhat of a big committee going for all this rushing attack that they're hoping to do. So let's take a look a bit at the players from last year in Atlanta and what they did rushing, a little bit of receiving here, and that's truly it. I mean, even behind Bijan's head over there, you won't see much in Caleb Huntley's receiving work. You don't see a whole lot of work in the middle here, which is Tyler Algier, and then on the left, you're going to see Cordero Patterson. There's not a lot of receiving work that went around for the running backs. That's just the type of offense they're in. It's a big, big rushing attack. And you can definitely see that through the numbers that are here. Look how many attempts are over 15. Week on Cordero, week 1, week 3, Tyler Algier, week 6, week 7, week 15, 16, 17, 18. And over there we have Caleb Huntley on weeks 6 and 8. So I'm happy with drafting Bijan if the expectation he can steadily produce 15 to 18 fantasy points. Fantastic. That'll likely keep him a top 10 running back. And then as next year comes around, likely becomes the running back. Why I still have him in my top 3 running back or rankings really comes down to, as I was digging into it more, looking at their schedule. So Atlanta has a ton of soft and mediocre run defenses they're gonna face. Starting off the year, they have the Panthers, Packers, and Lions. Okay. Packers are rebuilding. Lions should be all right. Panthers okay. So week 4, Jags. Week 5, Texans. Week 6, Commanders. Jags could be okay. Commanders might be all right. Then we go into week 7, Bucks, Titans, then Vikings. We know the Bucks defense can be okay. Titans are all right. Vikings are rebuilding. Who knows what we're getting out of them? And then we're into week 10, the Cardinals. We know the Cardinals defense, the Cardinals team in general, probably won't be good. And then finally in week 11, they see the Saints. When the Falcons finally reach week 11, what I see is really their first test of a good defense. Up until then, you can expect nothing but a ton of rushes, a ton of just workload for all of the running backs, and so that'll benefit Bijan. But I still see those first few weeks as him being in the committee, as he's getting the offense, as he's getting everything down, and that might limit what people will expect, and people will feel let down. But I really feel that late Bijan for the 2023 season is going to be what you're looking for. And most likely 2024 is going to be the Bijan that we are drafting first. And he likely is RB1 again next year. We can expect a lot of things out of this rushing attack and out of Bijan. They're going to have a good offensive line that could be one of the best in the league. Their defense is improving, and it could hold teams to be all right. As you know, we see those 10 teams that are coming off before the Saints, they're not super prolific in offense. I mean, the Lions and the Jags might be the biggest offense, and the Vikings. You know, maybe they're coming in 7-3 and still riding Ritter. You never know what's going to happen. Do I think if Heineke comes in at some point during the season, does that change the scope of things? Yeah, I think the efficiency and what the expectation of the running backs will be different because he is slightly more mobile. But I think the offense is going to be the offense. And aside from the Mariota stats from last year, I think this offense is going to very much be focused and predicated on the rush and the rushing attack and end up with a higher percentage or one of the higher percentage rushing in the NFL. I hope he falls somewhere in between of being, you know, a good late season push and great running back there and, you know, working in more of a timeshare than we expect. You know, I hope he falls into that median, at least for all the expectations and the hype that we have for him. I think he does, you know, less than 13, 14 points per game. I feel a lot of people will think he's a bust, and that's the time that I will buy him. Next up on our list here, we have Jordan Addison and Quentin Johnston. Currently, their sleeper ADPs are right next to each other at 53 and 54. I think it's a fair appropriation of what their ADP is right now, but there are definitely players that I would take after them that I want to start my dynasty teams with. So a couple of those players, well, all of those players that I want to take: Amari Cooper, Derrick Henry, Dameon Pierce, and J.K. Dobbins. So we're looking at 53, which is about round 5. Likely you could have scored 1, 2 running backs, and maybe even a top tight end, and now you're filling out your starting spot, or maybe you grabbed an elite running back, elite wide receiver, another one of either of those, and now you're in the 5th round, and you're looking at Amari Cooper, Derrick Henry, Dameon Pierce, Quentin Johnston, or Jordan Addison. I think the smart choice is to go with the 4 veterans over the 2 rookies. Addison, I think he gets some good targets. I think he has a few touchdowns, and he has a nice amount of yards. But with Justin Jefferson and Hawk there, his chances of amassing huge target shares are low, and he will have to likely be efficient with what he gets to really produce in the aspect of where you would draft him here as your wide receiver 2. My expectation for Addison, especially this year, is a high-end wide receiver 3. If he is able to sneak in more than 8 touchdowns, he should hit the verge of wide receiver 2. I know Thielen did that, but if you remember, Thielen got in on receptions and touchdowns. It wasn't a whole mass of yards. He just did it with a whole bunch of receiving work, and he was a red zone target. QJ, I have him solidly as a mid to low end wide receiver 3. He has a huge competition for targets. He's got Keenan there, Mike Williams, Gerald Everett, Austin Eckler. There is a lack of voided targets. They haven't lost anybody, they just added him. It's hard to say or justify that QJ is really going to see a huge workload right off the bat. His measurables, what he's shown to do, could be very valuable, and going forward, I can understand people wanting to have him for future builds or rebuilding teams. Just the expectation on him this year has got to be low. You know, wide receiver 3, maybe even wide receiver 4, just depends on injuries and what happens. How much target share can he carve out? Who's he going to overtake in targets to really get to that spot where I'm drafting him over starting running backs, over a starting wide receiver 1 on his team? And Is the time to sell him going to be when Keenan or Mike Williams gets hurt and just really avoid the roller coaster that could be Quentin Johnston for the first year or two? Well, I am personally huge on the Chargers. This year, going forward, I want to see what Kellen Moore can do with that team, which also helps change the structure of Keenan Allen's usage, Mike Williams, Gerald Everett. Like if you looked at the previous offenses that were run in Dallas, like they had a good solid wide receiver one, wide receiver two, 1A, 1B on their receivers. Their tight end was involved, their running back was involved. Going into the Chargers just has more elite players at every position. Austin Eckler is a much better receiving back than Zeke or Pollard. I'm out. Quentin Johnston right now. If I got him in a rookie draft, I'd be good, but I think starting him in my dynasty startup, I'm not picking him in the 5th round. It's not going to work for me. I'm going to take somebody else like one of these 4 veteran players. We'll get the elephant out of the room here. Alabama alumni, Derrick Henry, he likely falls off this year. Yes. But if you need an RB1 for your team and you can draft one in the 5th round, lock it up. There are no real threats to his workload. If you're going to have Derrick Henry or somebody else, it's very likely you're going to have Derrick Henry. He's just a beast of a man, and until the wheels fall off, they are just going to keep his workload the same. He comes in completely healthy and has a phenomenal year. We can all take a moment here, mentally insert all the ridiculous workout videos we've seen of Derrick Henry, all the off-season stuff that he puts in, the attention that he's gotten with his workouts, that people come train with Derrick Henry. What's to expect but what he's shown us? He showed us his rushing attacks went down just a little bit, but he got more receiving work than he's got in his career. Amari, he had one less 10-target game with Deshaun than he did Brissett. He was solid again, just like the year before and the year before. If Amari Cooper isn't in your top 15 wide receivers, I'd be shocked because he should be. 5 of his 8 years, he has been in the top 15. He's the wide receiver 1 on the Browns, and that team's going to be good enough that they have to watch out for the quarterback. They're going to have to watch out for the running back. And now at wide receiver, they got some other tools like Elijah Moore. They've got Charles Tillman, DPJ. They still have Anthony Schwartz, who's just a speed guy. But those are things that they're going to have to watch out for. And I think it's already been shown Deshaun Watson is going to trust Amari. He's a veteran receiver that gets open, smooth route running, is supposed to be where he's at. And I think that works out well with Deshaun Watson's ability. Open receivers are always easier to hit. That's 2 of the vets off the list. Now let's go to one of the conundrums, Dameon Pierce. Last year, I feel like he really showed what he could do with the workload. And now they bring in Devin Singletary, and everybody's torn on what's going to happen. Well, we've already seen that Devin Singletary isn't a main rushing back. He got replaced by Zach Moss. To have Zach Moss go away, to have Zach Moss come in, like the Buffalo Bills just didn't know what to do because there wasn't an efficient enough runner. So Josh Allen taking the touches, to me, it doesn't make a factor of what I'm doing with Dameon Pierce. There is enough work to go around to have Devin Singletary to have a share of some receiving work, 3rd down work. We take a look at these charts here behind us. These are the stats from the running backs last year on the Texans. We've got Dameon Pierce, Rex Burkhead, and Daria Gumbawale. We are looking at the receiving work first. Dameon Pierce and Rex Burkhead took on most of that. Daria Gumbawale had a couple good games of targets, but that was about it. Other than that, rushing, it all went through Dameon Pierce. Let's look at some of these stats here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 games, 20 plus touches. In those games, 2 receptions, 3 receptions, 4 receptions. Those are just huge workloads. The efficiency wasn't phenomenal or great, but it's also a very big rebuilding team, and you had no threat in the quarterback position with Davis Mills. Coming in with Stroud now, probably a healthy Nico Collins, and the other weapons that they've brought in, it's going to take some of that stress off of the rushing game. The defenses won't be able to just load the box and expect them to try to beat him through the air because they're going to have a legitimate passing option. Not phenomenal, but something legit, much more legitimate than what they carried in the previous season. Pierce still gets valuable red zone work. He still gets goal line work. He's going to be the main rushing attack between the 40s. He has a mobile, not essentially rushing quarterback. Stroud's mostly a pocket passer. I would expect checkdowns when Stroud gets rushed. Now, they won't be, check down amount won't be astronomical. It's not going to push Damian Pierce or the running backs into the Eckler type receiving role or Kamara where they're just getting reception after reception. That's just not going to be it. But if they're a total of 20 receptions over the year for Pierce, that might be something that works out. It's not going to be an exceptional number, but I would expect to see, maybe a total of 20 targets over the year that go to Pierce as a check down and not just a designed play. To me, Pierce's workload will be solid enough to make him an RB2. And if I'm picking 53rd and 54th, I would love to probably start my running backs here. If I can go a tandem of having Dameon Pierce and my next player, J.K. Dobbins, I would love that as my running back 1 and 2 on a team. Well, they'd probably be 1A, 1B, but they're running back 2s with a lot of future upside. Let's switch this over here and let's talk a little bit about J.K. Dobbins. Before we get into J.K., gotta talk Lamar. Lamar has his money now. He's gonna stay on the field and he's gonna earn it. And to do that, he's got to rush less. He's got to pass more, which is great for everybody on that offense. All the wide receivers, the running backs, everything. Yes, there's going to be less rushing from Lamar. Well, in design plays. Lamar can still carry his team if needs be. If he needs to put the team on his back and rush it for 250 yards in a game to make it happen, that's going to be what he's going to do. They're going to look first to have the running backs run, have the receivers catch, and focus on letting Lamar win games. A healthy JK has shown us nothing but great efficiency. Heck, half of his games last year, he averaged more than 5 yards a game. With 2 of his games, he had a game of 8 yards per carry on 15 carries and 9+ yards per carry on 13 carries. Those are ridiculous numbers. That's a ridiculous amount of efficiency. His last full year-ish, his rookie year, we've seen him have 6s and 7s in the yards per carry average. Dobbin is coming into the season fully healthy after his ACL surgery last year. He made it back, had some great games, proved that he's still going to be highly efficient, and now there's going to be just a fewer, less design runs for Lamar and more for the running backs. Now, not saying that they're going to completely eradicate Lamar rushing. That'd be ridiculous. That's one of his threats. To have more of a path where the running backs will have opportunities and much more balanced attack to keep defense on their heels between rushing and passing, I think that just lines up enough room for JK to continue his streak of efficiency. And another reason why I would rather start my team with J.K. Dobbins for this year and next year versus what we're going to get out of Addison and QJ. Now, out of QJ and Addison, I definitely would take Addison over. I think the potential he has to be a solid wide receiver too for years and years is going to be great. Him and JJ are going to be a dynamic duo to have to overcome year after year. We will see what happens with the quarterback, but I don't think that's going to be an issue. If you have 2 prolifically great receivers like that, you're going to attract a quarterback that wants to throw to them. This is going to be the part 1 of where do these rookies rank in the startups, because as I was digging into it, I was just going to talk about the players after, and okay, I can get this player and that player, and then I started to dig into it and got caught up in some of the stats and shocked at what I was able to find. This will be part 1. I will have another part 2 coming out here in the next few days. Until then, I hope you all have a great one.